when I thought about what to say, I didn't have any prepared notes because this is one of those for me anyway, this is one of those circle the calendar dates where when I get very excited about the fact that what a privilege and an honor it is to be up here on this stage getting to talk to folks like you. These aren't some folks, 200 folks randomly picked off the streets. These are people that are here because they want to be here and they care more about this country than they do themselves. And that says a lot. So what I thought about, what I want to say is, number one, say thank you. Thank you to Chuck and everybody else that organized this event. Thank you to my colleagues up here who for 7 months proved, each and every person up here, proved that they had honesty, integrity, and courage. Because it's hard to be down there when you're away from your family and when you're away from your support structure. And to have folks here that don't care about what the special interests want, they really care about what the state can do to take the shackles of government off. I remember when we were going, me and Scott Turner and the rest of us, we were out campaigning. And I heard Scott, and every time I hear Scott speak, I want to just say, amen! Because he is so inspired. But he's so inspired. And we would say things like, there's a battle going on in this country. And I'm not talking about the conflict in Iraq or the war in Afghanistan. I'm talking about a battle for our very freedoms. For the way that we want to live our lives. For the way that we want to run our businesses. And we want to be able to worship the Almighty to the dictates of our own conscience. And after 7 months of being down in Austin, you can see that all of those things can be threatened even in Texas. And that's why the people up here will not be influenced by big special interest checks. Unfortunately, there's leadership in Austin that are, on a repeated basis. When you see legislation that makes perfect sense for the majority of Texans to never even make it to the House floor, because that's how they kill it. They have things like, we'll get to this, I guess, in Q&As, but HB, I think it was 1467, that get this. If you get convicted as a state legislator, of corruption due to your office, you steal campaign funds, you sell a vote, whatever, you get convicted of a felony. After you get out of prison, you still collect your pension. I mean, that's absurd. They can't let that hit the floor. If that hits the floor, it's got to be 150 to 0 vote. How do you vote against that? So what they do is they kill in the committee process. So it's very important, in closing, it's very important what we do here tonight. What we do here in Texas, because this isn't just affecting the 26 million Texans. Where would this country be without Texas? Please remember that over the last 5 years, Texas has created almost as many jobs, one state, as all of the other 49 states combined. That recession in 08 would have been a depression. So they're watching us. And one of my colleagues said when we first got down there, one of the freshman colleagues said, the world is run by those who show up. Thank you for doing just that. God bless you.
Well, I'll tell you what, man, I was going to come at you with this lipstick on a pig thing, the water bill, SGR 1, but I think I'm going back to Pat Fallon. Pat, you walked right into this. Senator Paxton, Representative Laubenberg, and Chairman Todd Hunter, and others say that Texas sessions are only 140 days and then indicate that's good because it limits the damage that is being done to the laws and citizens of Texas. Is it possible to have a legislative session that establishes a budget, improves the quality of life, enhances personal freedom, improves quality of education, and limits government infringements? And if so, how?
Chuck, great question. Is it possible? Yes. How? Get more folks elected like the people to the right and the left of me. There are a lot of races. We're very lucky and fortunate because we have population density in Dallas-Fort Worth that each state house district is only 170,000 people. So if you're happy with your state representative, and particularly if they don't get a challenge, you can still have a say in the process because all of us up here get one vote. And there are other races in this area that have folks that profess to be, well, like one person I can think of, they campaign like Reagan, but they vote like Pelosi. And that's what we have to be vigilant about, and that's what we have to watch for, and that's why we have to pay attention. You know, we have a lot of activists in this room, and you all do that. And we need to spread the word, and social media gives us an amazing outlet to do that now with Facebook and blast emails and things. Yeah, it is possible, but you need Ken Paxton as your Attorney General. You know, you need great folks up here, like Van Taylor in the House and now hopefully in the Senate. And these people all up here to get reelected. You get new people down there. Because one of the things that Jody would say and Ken would say to all of us, and actually Van said it too, was your class, there's 43 of you, there's 29 Republicans, there's about, of those 29, probably 18, 19 solid conservatives. It's refreshing to have the reinforcements, but we were not quite there to be more of it. And in the 84th legislature, we need more rookies that will buck the system, that will think for themselves, that won't just do what leadership wants them to do to get along and go along to get the big fat lobbyist check.
We'll step up if you'll tell us now that you'll run for Speaker of the House.
I'm going to vote for the most conservative candidate in this point. Dennis, a lot of them up here, but I can myself voting for. Dennis, specifically, I don't think it's ever a good idea to quote the UN. You know, and ultimately, if this is going to be a Democratic Republic, the final say should go to your elected representatives, not to appointees and not to commissions. I mean, the people that you directly, so if you don't like what we're doing, get rid of us and get the people in. Not appointees, and I hate those layers. You see it a lot at the city level. I was on the city council where we would form these boards, and then only the board members could elect their executive director, and it was hard to get at that person to change things. And that's ridiculous. Don't add any more layers. Direct representation. You know, to echo, Gio Capriglione was my desk mate, so I have the best desk mate in the whole house this session. But one of the focuses that I had with running, and still a deep commitment, is to put it and to have an audio system that works better. Transparency is very important, and what they do, again, is this little trick. So as far as reform goes, let me start answering the question by saying we need people with principles and integrity to win in the first place. That'd be a nice reform. And to understand that government, and have a really acute understanding that government can't give to anyone something that they didn't first take from someone else. You know, when they talk about revenue, and I got very fired up, and Van gave me a kind of a comical bit of support after I did it, but you gotta understand the budget process, like Jeff was saying, okay? We had HB1, the first budget, the first bite of the apple of the budget, I believe it was in April 5th. And I think everybody up here, or most of us, voted for that particular budget. Well, then it goes to the Senate, and they add on a whole bunch of more money, in fact, it's in the billions, and it became a bad budget. A decent budget became a bad one, and it came back to us about a month later. But I noticed something in HB1, what happened, because we had never been through it before, a lot of the freshmen. And it takes all day long, there's 300 amendments, there's a bunch of garbage that goes on there that they accept, and they say, well, we'll just strip it out later. So we started calling for record votes. We called for 60, 70 record votes to get them on the record, number one. And then after the budget was passed, fast forward through about 13 hours, they thanked the legislative budget. They thanked the chairman of appropriations. They thanked by name all of these sub-chairmen. They thanked the appropriations committee. They marched out an entire legislative budget board, about 60, 80 people, and they thanked them. We gave a standing ovation. They never thanked the person that flipped the whole bill. Texas taxpayer. So I was a little freshman, you know, I haven't done a lot of these public events. You don't usually get nervous publicly speaking, but quite honestly, when you're talking about 150 colleagues and the people in the gallery and you're new there, when that bill came back, I swore that I was going to get up there and give a 2-minute speech to thank the Texas taxpayer. And I did that, and man, I tell you what, not usually being nervous, my heart was beating, I was shaking in my shoes, but I went up there and did just that. So, you know, thank you. You've got to realize what you work for. Transparency is vitally important. Gio had a great bill, and he put it in front of State Affairs. He laid the bill out. They belittled him, members of our own party, trying to, and it was an assault. It was ridiculous. It was like one of those worst things you'd see in D.C. And he stood his ground. because it was a good bill. It was about, you need to know if we have contracts with local governments. You have every right to know that. You should know that. Well, some of those people do, and they don't want you to know. You know, and then a bill, I think it was 435 I joint authored, to say, look, if you want to be a lobbyist after you serve in the legislature, you've got to take a 2-year off period. Because I think this session, 14 of them were state representatives on January 8th, and they were lobbyists on January 9th. And a lot of those same people used your money to send us what seemed like at first innocuous notes of support saying, hey, if you ever need anything, you let me know. On state letterhead with state money that they mailed it to us. And those people became lobbyists. How convenient. So transparency is very important for reform. And zero-based budgeting.
Issues that come before this committee. Let me give you some examples.
Sure.
PACs that represent the Department of Aging and Disability Services, PACs that represent mental health and mental retardation services, PACs that represent Texas Workforce Commission and local workforce development boards, PACs that represent group home facilities, PACs that represent housing and health services, PACs that represent interest. Do you understand why we can't get anything done as individuals? PACs that represent children's advocacy or their counterparts, PACs or individuals that sit on a board or an IT company that are employed by an IT company. Anyone associated with technology industry who has testified before the technology committee in favor of or opposed to a bill before your committee, sir.
Chuck, great question. Long question, short answer, no. Fortunately, I'm a really bad fundraiser.
Dan Taylor, if you accepted donations, I'd like to ask Pat Fallon. Have you got something you can share with us about the state legislature?
I just wanted to share one quick story that, you know, you're down there for what we thought was going to be 5 months and ended up being 7.5. And a lot of things, you sometimes in one breath you'll see something incredibly noble happen. And then next you'll see something very absurd, very disheartening and almost menacing. But what I want to share with you, one of the funnier things that I saw and was a part of. There's a state rep named Lon Burnham. And Lon is described, probably self-described himself, as about 3 ticks left of Trotsky. He's a lefty of the old-fashioned ilk. But anyhow, he had a bill that he wanted to, now get this, it was a bill that he considered a local bill. He did not talk to the mayor of Fort Worth. He did not talk to other state reps in Tarrant County, that's where he's from, that this would have affected. So he didn't really follow the protocol to begin with. But what he wanted to do was rename the Purple Heart Expressway. And by the way, he did not rename, in my own opinion, the Purple Heart Expressway. It's a pretty darn good name. He wanted to rename it in his section of Tarrant, in this section of Tarrant County, the Cesar Chavez. Now, Lon Burnham is one of only about 7 white Democrats left in the state of Texas in the House, and he was obviously pandering to his increasingly changing demographic, thinking that he would do this and they would vote for him. Well, several of us up here in the House had a problem with that for a lot of different reasons. My personal one was, you know, Nino Aquino is a personal political hero of mine who was jailed by the Marcos regime. Cesar Chavez went to the Philippines in 1977 to praise Marcos and his regime while Nino Aquino was in prison for years, and that regime killed him 6 years later and assassinated him. I don't want that renamed Cesar Chavez Highway, and neither do a lot of the Tarrant County reps. So there was a big scrum on the House floor, where on one side you had a lot of the liberal Democratic Hispanic reps, who to them, in their worldview, is Cesar Chavez is kind of like Martin Luther King. I don't see it that way, I think many of you would. So Gio, Jonathan Stickland, and some of the other Tarrant County reps were right in the thick of it. And we were arguing back and forth, and I say, you know Nino Aquino? No, I don't, and so we were trying to educate. So a scrum developed, and it got a bit contentious. So I thought I had a good idea. And I have to explain to you who Jonathan Stickland is if you do not know. He is the youngest member of the Republican delegation. He is 29 years old. He is a principal firefighter. And he would say he's big boned. He's a big man, big presence, great guy. So Stickland's in there, and I got a really good idea. And I grabbed Gio, and I said, Gio, you know what we should do? If they're sitting there saying that this is racist and all this other garbage, why don't we rename that portion after a Medal of Honor recipient that happened to be Hispanic? Ha-ha! And Gio goes, yeah, that's good. Stickland's got a way better idea. And I look over at Stickland, and he had gotten an amendment drafted on the House floor, actually had a staff do this, and he's holding it in his hand, and he's arguing with the local Democrats. And I said, yeah, what is it? He says, Stickland's got an amendment that's going to rename it the Jesus Christ Highway. So I went up to Stick, and I say, Stick, do you really got an amendment that's going to rename it the Jesus Christ Highway? And he smiles, just a 10,000 watt smile. He says, oh yeah, Pat, you know why? He said, why? He says, because in Texas, even liberals are afraid to vote against Jesus.